Welcome to Lions, Tigers, and Bears.
Every story has a storyteller, the one who guides us through the story. Sometimes he may not be alone, but in other cases, he may not be at all an incorporeal, omniscient being, a direct participant in the action. At any given time, the narrator has unlimited power over the story. After all, we are readers, viewers, or players made an unspoken pact with him. The story is told the way it happened, and we completely trust it, which, however, does not mean that we cannot be deceived, and the narrator will not distort the story for our own interest. This is what a magician used to say.
Want to be fooled.
In 1961, the literary Wayne Booth, in his book The Rhetoric of Fiction, coined the term so-called unreliable storyteller. In examining Wayne Booth's work, researcher Peter Rabe identified an unreliable storyteller as one who lies, withholds, or underestimates the information being communicated. Examples of such storytellers can be found in classics such as the Canterbury Tales Chaucer, Emily Brant's Wuthering Heights, and Agatha Christie's novellas, notably The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. However, in the future, we will stick to slightly more modern examples. The reasons for unreliability can be different. Firstly, this is a deliberate decision. The technique on which the first half of The Disappeared is built from the pen of Gillian Flynn. Flynn and director David Fincher, as well as the Emmy character in the story, lead us on the wrong track, deliberately withholding the true state of affairs, which reflects Emmy's intentions to fabricate her own death and blame her husband for it. Another example already from video games is the Atlas character from the first BioShock. Having fallen into an underwater rapture, Jack's hero, as well as the player, has to conclude the same unspoken pact with him. Because we are strangers in the world of an underwater city, unlike Atlas, which knows everything about the surrounding reality and inhabitants, although, as it turned out later, everything is far from so obvious. The use of the unreliable storyteller trope in these examples is driven by character traits and intrinsic motivation. That Atlas and Emmy have their own personal goals at the beginning of the story are unknown to us, and they, without remorse, use our ignorance for personal gain, which at the moment of disclosure makes the viewer, our player, feel deceived. This trait is great for antagonists because it immediately sets us up against them. The second reason is a mental illness or an altered state of consciousness of the hero. Well-known examples are, of course, Fight Club, Isle of the Damned, Memento, and the slightly less famous The Girl on the Train. The characters here cannot tell us the truth because they themselves do not know it, which, however, does not always happen. I would like to talk about an episode of the series Mr. Robot, to be specific, the 7 episodes of Season 2 called Handshake. So if you don't want unnecessary spoilers, then I advise you to skip the video a little. Throughout most of the second season, the hacker Elliot tells his fictional friend, and through him, about his life with his mother. The hero closed himself off from the whole world after the perfect organization of the Society of the Revolution. He visits a local cafe, spends time on the basketball court, and, like in the first season, continues to visit his psychoanalyst. As Elliot himself says, everything I told is true. It's just a way to deal with it. In games, for example, Call of Juarez, Gunslinger is just an example of an unreliable storyteller, as can be found in the work of David Redden or in the Hotline Miami series, with its trips and uncertainty of what is real. Another extremely interesting example of an unreliable storyteller, or even storytellers, is the American Animals movie by Bart Layton. The heroes of the film are 4 students from Kentucky who, at the beginning of the 2000th, planned to steal rare editions of books from the university library. The story actually happened, and the film switches between interviews with real participants in the events and the story itself. An interesting point here is that each of the participants in the events remembers them differently, which is reflected even in the visual language of the film. For example, in the construction of some
And then suddenly Warren's talking to a guy with a ponytail and a blue scarf. Or was it a purple scarf?
Which reflects the subjective nature of our memory and how we perceive events and tell stories. Since such an example can be useful for the plot, an unreliable storyteller leaves a lot of room for possible ramifications of the story. However, it must be clearly associated with the characters or the universe of the work. Otherwise, such a twist will look like a banal script cheating. But that's all for today. What examples of an unreliable storyteller do you know? What impact did they have on the storytelling, and how did they make you feel? Let's discuss this in the comments below.